Welcome, everybody. This is Activities Across Grade Levels, and today we're going to be talking about fake news, which is one of those topics that's kind of fun to talk about, kind of timely, is it not? So as we jump into it, kind of the usual things, but let's start with a little thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, first of all, to those of you who are here. Right now, teachers who are showing up to continue learn, like continuous improvement. I give cred and thanks to the teachers who show up today because it is a busy time. Also, thanks to Fowler Unified School District. That's where I come from, and I know a lot of my teachers and especially my boss. Hi, boss. Watch this after the recording, and so thank you so much for what you do and for also being committed to continuous learning.
We're going to send a thank you to all of the good folks associated with the Krause Center for Innovation at Foothill College in Los Altos Hills, California, and all of the Merit people who are participating in this and watching the recording. You rock, and you know who you are. And so very, very cool to have you guys with us. As we do every week, we send a thanks out to Richard Byrne, who is my colleague on Two EdTech Guys Take Questions and Share Cool Stuff. And normally this semester it's going to run Thursdays at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. But this week it's going to be tomorrow at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. So feel free to join us for that if the spirit moves you in that direction. We're very happy to see you today. The voice you heard a minute ago was Susan. Susan, who are you?
Hi, y'all. I am Susan Stewart. I'm an instructional technology teacher on special assignment. I'm a tech coach from Fresno, California. I have been a tech coach for 7 years. Before that, I spent 14 years teaching kindergarten and second grade. I'm now taking on some new responsibilities, helping out with our brand new Virtual Learning Academy, which is really exciting to help meet the needs of our learners as we transition to this new era of education.
Very cool. And my name is Rushton Hurley. I'm a former high school teacher of Japanese language, former middle school teacher of video production, a former principal of a K-12 school, a former principal of an online high school, and now I run a little shindig called Next Vista for Learning. But what I want to do is I want to shift gears so that we can talk a little bit about our guest, because we have got a guest who's going to be driving the slides for the next 20 minutes. And this guy is serious fun. He and I have been friends for I don't know how many years. But we share a love of great education and good basketball and hanging out with cool people. And he is one of the co-authors of a book he's going to tell you a little bit about and is going to be central to what we talk about today. But Darren, please take control. You are the man. Go.
Man, yes, finally. Can you hear me all right, I hope?
Yep.
This is all great. I thank you for allowing me to be here. It's kind of some flashbacks from Merit and my time driving through Fresno and all kinds of things. I'm having flashbacks in my mind, so I'm excited to do this. I am a former secondary teacher. I did that. I kind of look at my career as 3-act play so far. 12 years in the secondary level, teaching social studies and CTE, that back then we called it vocational ed. And then this other 11 to 12 years in the ed tech world, running events, curating really talented people like Rushton, and bringing them and sharing them with others. Also doing keynotes, workshops on a myriad of topics. And most recently in what I would call Act 3 is I'm spending a lot of time, again, still in the ed tech world, but also seeing how fake news, misinformation, disinformation is impacting our democracy, the republic, globally, all aspects. And so I actually spent some time 2 years ago with a co-author named Jennifer Lagarde, who I'm going to share with you in a second, writing a book about this very topic and how we need to spend more time embedding it into the curriculum that we teach, because it's a little bit of everywhere. And we know kids are on mobile devices all the time, and we're kind of neglecting that. Also, I will throw in spending a lot of time building courses and doing things for social emotional learning, and doing consulting for various things throughout the country. I need to talk about my co-author because she's a big deal. Her name's Jennifer Lagarde. You can follow her on Twitter. She is a media specialist extraordinaire. So we kind of pulled her media specialist side with my social studies side, and that came the book, and we were working on book 2. And I'm going to show you some pieces that a lot of people have not seen, which is coming out for this book 2 coming soon. So I'll leave it at that.
Very cool. This little webinar is something that we do as a part of the nonprofit Next Vista for Learning. Go ahead and go to the next slide on that. Next Vista's main thing is a free library of videos by and for teachers and students everywhere, and we love that we're getting to add these webinar recordings as possibilities for teachers as well. So you can find all kinds of videos on the site. Stay in touch with me if you're interested, and I'll hand it right back to Darren. Actually, I'll do it right after I explain how this works. Is what this. So what we do all the time with this particular webinar is we take a particular topic and we say, what does this look like when we're working with young students? What does this look like when we're working with middle schoolers, high schoolers? And how we're going to do this today is we're going to start by talking about some activities for helping kids begin to think in the right direction, both the young learners and the upper elementary. So Darren, start us off with that. Talk to us about a couple of fantastic tools you've got right there.
So what I've done is break it down into those 3 sections as Rushton talked about. In teaching media literacy, or in teaching, like, I don't love to use, even though it's in the book, fake news. I really like to think about it as misinformation, disinformation, those kinds of things. It's a quick and easy term. We know it is fake news, but it's really about those other things. So at a very young level, it's very difficult to get them to understand the complexity of this. And so what I like to do is pick themes that I know folks will, should be or are teaching in based on the standards. And one of those is around perspective. And if you can get young kids to understand perspective, it then leads to empathy and compassion and all those skills that we know young kids need to learn to be, as they begin to distinguish themselves in a society and as an individual. 2 resources that I want to share are actually not, I mean, they can be digital, but they are books. They came from books. The first one I just love, and I'm going to show you a small clip about it, and it's called I See by R. Henderson. Let me just show you a little clip so you can get an idea of what this is.
I see first page. Okay.
I see last.
I see future.
I see past.
I see up. Go.
And I see down.
And there's kind of a dramatic pause there, but you can get the idea that you're supposed to read this with someone else. And you actually sit across from each other. It designates who reads. And as you look at the picture on the book, it's showing it from a different perspective. Leads to lots of conversations, leads to dialogue, leads to not just doing it by yourself, because we're all in this together. That's a turbo version of that book, but I just love it for so many layers. And then a second one I want to show you is called Zoom. It's actually from 1995, because not all old things are bad. And it's by Istvan Banya, and he's Hungarian, so hopefully I did not destroy his name, but I want to show you this real quickly.
Alex, turn around.
so I'm going to go ahead and skip ahead on that one. It has to show you the layers, which is why I took a little longer on that one. But what I love about that particular one is you can't discuss with kids something like what happened in Covington, for example. If you know that story, it was told from many different layers in fake news or misinformation. And depending on the layer that you looked at, it changed the narrative or the perspective. And so I think it's a way to begin those topics with them, but maybe not getting in as heavy as something like the Covington incident. And there's just so many layers to it. I also, just to kind of attach this into middle school and high school, I think you could use the same thing. And with the drone technology that we have today, you could take kids out and physically have them use a drone and use that same kind of perspective for all kinds of different subjects. So again, with the time we have today, we can't go into it too deep, but I wanted to give you at least a little flavor on that. When we get into middle school, what I want to, it's typically a time where they're trying to determine who they are, where they're going, all those kinds of things, what those expectations are. And it's a real right from wrong type of role, as we know, as they're developing as human beings. But it also is a great time to introduce them to being a detective. Middle schoolers are trying to figure out the world and who they are, and you can give them a skill. And if you notice, a lot of publications are written at that age where like a detective and figuring out the mystery. So we like to move into much more of a space around this. And that is giving them this idea of like, we're going to show you something, and it's your job as a detective to figure out, is this fact or is this fiction? What I love, I hate and love, I should say, about the landscape is there's so much fake news and misinformation out there that you have a lot to choose from. And so I'm going to show you a quick example of something that I pulled off of Instagram and use it. I would show them the whole thing, but I'm only going to show you a clip of it and then use that as the vehicle for the lesson.
My dog is just about the size of my refrigerator, maybe a foot taller. Juji weighs about 450 to 460 pounds, give or take. When we first got Juji, he was just like any other dog. He was healthy, about 15 pounds, but I had no idea what I was getting myself into. The first year that we had him, everything was completely normal. The vet said he was growing up fine, nothing to be alarmed about. It wasn't until about the second year that there were some red flags. He kept growing out of collars, and he could barely fit on the couch, which is a big deal. I couldn't pick him up anymore, and that's when I started realizing something might be up. We went back to the vet. The vet told me he has a condition where there was too much calcium and vitamin D in his bones, causing him to grow at an alarming rate. She said it would not affect his health in any way, but he might be huge. And she was right.
So I've done this lesson several times with middle schoolers, and they are all over it. And they immediately have, after you watch the whole video, they're like, yes, this is real, this is fake. Make a determination. I have them write it on paper. And then I begin to think, now, but what would a detective do? You always have this initial thought of what's going on. You folks do it all the time with students, with the playground, with, classroom, classmates, all that. You make these quick determinations. But how do detectives think? What would they do? What would you do, for example, when you're on your mobile device and you get something from your friend? Do you just immediately think it's truth, or should you unpack it a bit? And so I'll take them through the 6 questions. And what I would do is actually do it with them. We work alongside of each other step by step. I can't do that because of our time today, but I want to give you an example. We would show the media, make a choice, and then we would use a resource like this. And I've both put it on a QR code that you can go to it, or it's a link that takes you into something that was created by Common Sense Media. Again, I have a lot of other resources that I would show you, but this particular one is really easy. You can actually put it up in your room, and it's got a series of questions that's on it. And these are real questions that we would want to unpack. Obviously, we talk at them differently if it's high school or adults, but these are the main components to how do you unpack this. And what I love about the 450-pound dog is there is lots of elements in here of legitimate sources. One of the things you saw up in the upper right-hand corner is the dodo. And if you look at that site, beginning when you look at it, you say the dodo bird, they must be teasing us, something's not quite right. But if you go to the site, it's actually for animals, and it's a legitimate site. It's really, really good. So the first layer of it is like, oh, okay, this might be good. And then as you continue to go, how did they unpack the message? What did you notice about it? You get them to practice noticing, and you go through each of these steps. Eventually, you're going to get to one that's going to trip them up. And one of those is it's on April 1st. And so when I have done this with adults go, well, it's April Fool's Day. So guaranteed it's fake. But then it was on this other side where maybe not. And so you don't know until you get to the very end of the series and you get in and you actually dig into who created the video. And when you see who created the video in his profile, you will see that he's actually, one, it's in all caps, it says Photoshop, which the kids usually don't pick up right away. And actually the middle school kids typically don't pick up the April Fool's Day thing, but you can throw them off a little bit. And then when you get to the end, it will actually say, hey, if you want me to do something for you, for your dog, I will make these. And so this is actually kind of an advertisement for him and what he does. And so it's a great way to get them thinking, wait, not everything that I get is legitimate, like it's not real, and unpack that, especially again, when you have this Snapchat world, this TikTok world, all these things that are coming to these kids, and they just immediately, based on what we know, they look at the headline and are making decisions in 8 seconds, whether it's true or false, and they're not unpacking it. And we need them to do that. And we, as adults, don't do it very well either, for that matter. So the last one, I would get into high school, and I would go in much deeper. And again, lots of layers to this, but they need to understand that they're part of an infodemic. We all are. And it has been by design. It's been not only by design with the software that we have, with advertising, with the change in how the media works, on down the line. It's a click economy. They need to understand economics. And so one of the ways that I do that is just going through and explaining to them a little bit about algorithms and bots and how they're around, getting them to understand that there are people out there that are trolls, that have reasons to manipulate you, whether it's their own personal well-being or again, trying to financially gain. We're now in a space where it's incredibly dangerous. You're making decisions about your health. And this is not just COVID. We've had a resurgence of measles in Vancouver, Washington, which we had almost eradicated, but due to fake news and things that have come out, it has absolutely shifted the narrative. We have a change in, we no longer want to pay for media. We used to want to pay for it. Now that we don't want to pay for it, it is destroyed the firewall between what used to be sponsors and is now journalists. Those two used to be separate. They can't do that anymore because we're not paying for news. And then just because of the internet, and this is a great thing and the curse, we have information overload. And these factors are leading to a lot of emotional instability. And that is a huge thing. I know SEL, like I told you, is a big part of this. And so we really got to drive those things home to these kids who are, again, getting lots of resources online. And so this is where I unveil something that I haven't showed very much yet. This is something that Jennifer and I are working on in book 2. Book 2 is going to be much more about lesson plans, resources, something like the 450-pound dog, but then break it down so you can do it in your classroom and then give you a bunch of resources of angles you can go depending on who you have in your class and what current things are going on. But we think these are the 4 critical areas of digital detectives. What I want to break down quickly in this slide is that if you notice, the top has a hand that's pointing at you. And what we need kids to understand at all levels, which is why we get into perspective and being a detective, but especially at the high school level, that you are in control of triggers and you are in control of access. That is on you. And so you have to understand what triggers you and why they are trying to trigger you. And at the other side is you have to understand how you access the information impact how you perceive it and believe it. And then if you look at the bottom two, which is forensic and motives, that's exterior. So that's the outside impacting you. So in some ways, it's a little bit of a nature nurture kind of thing. But it's a way to, how is the outside world impacting who and what I do and what I believe? Again, for time's sake, I can't go through all these as in depth that I'd like, but what I'm going to try to do is go through each quadrant with you and give you the basic concept. So the first one is triggers. They need to understand how the brain works. I'm going to ask Susan and Rushton to do this with me really quickly. I'd love for you to fold your hands, thumbs over top of each other. And then, and of course, Rushton's going to, is that how you normally fold your hands, Rushton? With two fingers together, or do you put one over the top of the other? How would you do that? Okay. So now I want you to notice which one's on top. So in my case, my left thumb is on top of my right. Notice which one it is. And then what I'd like you to do is actually change it. I'd like you to flop the other one over the top. What does that feel like?
A little different.
Susan's face tells it all. It feels odd, doesn't it? So that is the quickest example I can give you as how we process information. 95% of our brain is doing what we did when we fold our hands. It creates a system that makes it simple so our brain doesn't have to think, and that's where our biases come from. That's why it's so easy for you to brush your teeth, but the first time you brushed your teeth, you didn't quite know how to do it. That's the same with riding a bike. Then when you go back and do those things, it's an automatic mode, it's an easy. News is set up to trigger that and manipulate you to whatever. And the more information that they know about you, the easier it is to get to that. We want to get them to system 2. And the only way you're going to get them to system 2 is to slow down and not just immediately share something, not just immediately trust everybody, even your friends who you think, like, I believe if Rushton sends something to me, it's vetted and it's really good. But he may have been in a hurry that day and said, hey, Darren would like this, and shipped it to me, didn't ever go through it. I think he vetted it. I then share it with other people, and then boom, we're spreading it all over the place, and we've done nothing. So this is the turbo vision about understanding how they want to trigger us and how we are triggered. And again, we could go in a lot more depth, but that's the turbo version. We got to get people to version 2. If you remember, the second quadrant that we influence is access. How things, this is one of my huge things that I would normally put up is all these pictures I've taken when I've gone into schools where they've banned phones. I understand the classroom management reasons. I understand all those things. But you have to also understand that most of your kids, and it's certainly globally, everybody's going mobile and they're on their phones all the time. And if we're not teaching them how to use them and what to do, this is a huge opportunity. If you look at this graphic right here, the information that you can pull, the layers on a mobile device are much less. I don't know who the author is. It does say New York Times, but I have no idea who wrote it. Is this an op-ed piece? Is this a regular report? Like, what is this? I have no idea when it was posted. Is it shared or remixed by someone else? I can't read any of that on a mobile phone, but yet we're doing all this taking in of information on that. Whereas if you look at the other one, I at least have some ability to go back and look where it may have come from. Doesn't mean it's better to do it there. It just means we need to talk about the difference, and we're not doing that in schools. And then the bottom 2 layers, forensics, I can't get in as deep. Just the name in itself tells you it's a lot more complex. But what we have to start doing is looking at some of the traditional tests. Some of you have heard about like the CRAP test or the SIF test or all those tests that have been out there for a really long time. They still apply, but there's more layers to it. And so we have to start getting more into this authorship. We have to be able to look for clues in those embedded media. So there's like deep fakes and all these things out there now. The video I showed you, you could make some angles where that looks really real, even though he photoshopped it. I mean, you have to look for those clues. And then you got to go back and look at layers. Was it posted again? Who posted it? Where might the origin be? Those kinds of things. That's the deep, dark work that people don't want to do, but that's the forensics that we need to do. And then last but not least, we need to start getting people to understand the suspects. Because if you can get and understand who these suspects are. Yes, there's some cases stereotypes, but there's layer, like why they're doing what they're doing, why headlines are a certain way. How do you tell the difference between a bot and a troll and all those? Because if we can kind of broadcast the problem or the source, excuse me, you can begin to then get into what is it and why is it fake and how are they doing this, and then you'll see it more later on, because that system one will start to say, hey, this looks like a bot to me, or this looks like a troll, or in this case, a lot of people don't know what the blue liar is. It's very similar to the white liar, and I'm not going to tell you what that is. I'm going to leave that as a little cliffhanger to try to figure out the difference. And in the book, we're going to put in, we have more of these, but I wanted to give you an example of how do you get into the motives of people, which is that last piece. And then last but not least, I've got about 1 minute and 20 seconds, I think. And I'm hoping to let you ask a couple of questions, but I wanted to give you this resource. As I told you, I've spent a lot of time in social emotional learning as well as media literacy. And I'm finding that these two are hand in hand. If I talked to Susan growing up, I would bet that the images on Cosmopolitan before the internet was all crazy, that had an impact on her being a female in this world, because they airbrushed and they changed and they did all these things and we knew it, and that had an impact on herself and how she saw herself in the social world. And we used to talk about this in sociology and psychology all the time. What we're not seeing, what we're not taking into account now is, because we're being bombarded, not just in the front of the grocery line, but now constantly on everything, that it is impacting all 5 of these areas. And where we really were launched in this book is clearly in a democracy where you're trying to make have people vote and make an educated decision. Or if you're talking about healthcare, or if you're talking about your own psychology, if you're being manipulated to how you think and what you do based on information that isn't truth, then it's going to impact all these areas and how you see your brothers and sisters or people from other countries or whatever, and we could scale this. And so what I did is I put a link on here to 6 different articles that we wrote for a school library journal that has all kinds of resources, ideas, and things that you can do in your class with kids right away. And I tried to give you the fastest version I could give you in 20 minutes. So red hot and rolling, there you go.
Very cool. Thank you, Darren. If you want to shift back out of that, before we kind of hit the finishing slides, couple of questions. I know I've got one. Susan, if you have a particular question, I'll let you jump in.
Not necessarily a question, but I really did appreciate that thought, with the young learners in perspective, because that really is key there. That really spoke to me, that idea of just giving students the perspective that they're not the center of the universe, and developmentally they are, right? That's something that develops over time. But I love that book. Thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely. And I really do worry about that. I mean, kids are more digitally connected than ever before. It used to be Guns N' Roses or video games or whatever was going to ruin everybody. They're more connected than ever before. And I do worry about their sense of self and who they are and who they become. And if we don't start teaching them early, it's oh boy.
So, for me, a lot about the educational power of any given tool or technique or activity comes from watching it happen with kids. Has there been kind of a moment when you were doing, an activity with students where a student said something that for you was just really, really interesting? Yeah,
I mean, a lot of people so I did this, I did that 450 pound with a group of 5th graders. But before it, they were moving from poetry into credibility and those things. And I was like, I don't want to just show up and do this one-off can thing. So how can I weave poetry into it? And we did a thing on trolls, which was a poem, a poetry thing. And they were concerned that it was going to be too heavy for them because it was a pretty heavy video. I had the superintendent and the teachers watch it. And they were amazed. They were having high school-like discussions in 5th grade about the depth of this poetry. And then when we got them into talking about how do you be a digital detective, they were way into it. And then at the end, they were wanting more. And I gave them a little teaser about another video. And they're like, I've seen that, that's fake. And they're like, are you sure? And so like, they want to learn about this, just no, few people are teaching them about it. And I don't think you have to be a specialist to do every piece of it. I think we just have to start somewhere talking about it. And I think you can weave it into a lot of the curriculum that you're already doing.
Very cool.
Does that help at all? Or
no, absolutely, absolutely. And what we're about to do, by the way, is wind down the recording. But as we always do, those of us who are participating in the recording, as long as the speaker has time to keep talking, and
Sure,
we keep
absolutely.
sharing stories, which is good fun. So to wind things down, we hope that you will take an interest in the Next Vista newsletter, nextvista.org/newsletter. For having registered, you'll get a email that has the recording and the slides and links on these things, stuff like that. Take a look at the newsletter, see if it might be something that interests you. I have a blog called Inspiring Improvement, designed to help teachers and school leaders make their schools more personally and professionally satisfying places for everyone. And I've written some books, and I hope you will give that a look. And if for any reason you're like, oh, I want my team to be talking about this, I'll be happy to connect with you for free. So feel free to jump on that. So if you have questions, stick around. If you are watching this as a recording and have a question, email it to us. You're welcome to stay in touch. So Susan, if somebody's staying in touch with you, what do they do?
If you want to find me, you can find me on the internet at Tech Coach Susan. I'm Susan, I'm a tech coach, and I'm not very original in my Twitter naming conventions, right? And you can follow the hashtag K2Can2, because I really like to celebrate what our young learners can do. Speaking of that, coming up very, very soon, as in 2 days from now, we do have a virtual summit, the K2Can2 virtual summit. So excited. We've got an international event with lots and lots of K2 teachers, pre-K to third grade teachers really registered. And we're going to be celebrating, again, those young learners. And we have some friends of the program. We've got Coach Ben is going to be our opening keynote. And Val's going to be there as well. So Val soon will be there. So lots of great presenters really focusing on our young learners.
All right. Anytime with Coach Ben or Val, time well spent for sure. Darren, how do people stay in touch with you?
The best way, and I don't know, are you sharing? Because I can't see. Is it on here?
I am. So we're looking at the next to last slide, the one you put together.
Perfect. Okay, because I can't see it, so I'm flying blind. But this is the best way to get a hold of you both. My email, you can follow me on Twitter, or I was much better at it for a while, doing a newsletter on a regular basis, but I throw out a newsletter every once in a while with tools and things that I curate. How about that? So love to connect. If you have any questions, you want to go further, want me to do some things in your school, I'd be happy to do that.
Very cool. Very cool. My name is Rushton, former teacher, former principal, nonprofit guy, and married up. Thank you very much. I hope you will take a look at nextvista.org and my little nonprofit attempt to save the universe from ignorance, one creative video at a time. Thank you. And then there's a little tiny URL to get to the webinars, but you can also go to nextvista.org, and just from the front page, you can find out what's coming up. We've got one tomorrow at 1 o'clock, 11 o'clock Pacific, 2 o'clock Eastern. Two EdTech guys take questions and share cool stuff. Hopefully you might join us for that. But thank you very much for taking part in this. If you're watching it as a recording, stay in touch by all means. We would love to be able to share word of the different things we've got going on. And with that, we'll finish the recording and then keep talking to our cool guests. So everybody else, we'll see you next week.
Thank you.